Coming up on a very big show, Trent Cotchin, we ask about the exodus of premiership stars from Punt Road.
And one of our team wants to take exception to an AFL player there who's spending far too much time celebrating with the crowd and not nearly enough time celebrating with his teammates.
Joel Selwood picks his All-Australian team and Mitch Cleary with a massive helping of news. Talking footy, stick around. A big hello to everybody. Massive week as we gear up for the finals to start in a couple of weeks' time. Tim Watson, Trent Cotchin and Joel Selwood, welcome to you all. And you've just come out of the newsroom. There's plenty of it.
It never ceases to amaze how much topic or how much conversation this game throws up. Let's start somewhere dear to your heart tonight, Trent. Maybe you don't want to start there, but there is so much change that's appearing at Richmond at the moment. So many of your old premiership teammates that are departing. Dylan Grimes announced it yesterday. How does that make you feel?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, let's acknowledge Grimes' career. It's been an amazing one from, he started very much from the back row and worked his way to being, a significant contributor to our game. And I suppose when I reflect on, season 2024 for the Tigers, there's an element of sadness because when you leave a footy club, you want to see them continue to be a strong team that, you go into every weekend thinking you have a good chance of winning matches of footy. And I think when I reflect on it, I kind of sit there and I go, 4, 5, 6 years ago, we had so many conversations about what's that legacy that we're going to leave when our time's said and done, because at the end of the day, the reality is we all finish our careers at some point, and that's happening right before our eyes with some of the guys that I've played most of my footy with. And clearly it hasn't quite been the year that the Richmond Tigers and the Richmond faithful would have hoped of the Tigers.
What is the legacy that you were hoping that you're going to leave behind?
You reflect on the likes of what this bloke did and has continued to do with the Geelong Footy Club, and the Sydney Swans are another team that I look at and go, oh, wow, they just seem to be thereabouts all the time. And they might have the off year, but it's still not, finishing last on the ladder and so forth. So I think every team's striving to always be thereabouts. And I think that the challenge for where Richmond find themselves right now is, let's go hard in the draft, inject some new talent and, pick up the pieces of what this year's been, but learn the lessons and hopefully propel back to where I think they belong.
Well, I think everyone says you want to leave the place healthier than when you arrived. But in your case, that was certainly true. 3 premierships, an amazing run. I think the thing that's amazed the wider footy community is how quickly Richmond have got to this point. Yeah,
and I think we need to acknowledge that there's been a lot of injuries this year, but it also can't be an excuse. And I think what needs to happen now, they have a brilliant opportunity where, the season finishes as of this weekend. They can go away. The key leaders in the organisation can really start to plan out what the next phase of the football club's growth is. And, really just roll the sleeves up and have a crack at that with some youth.
Well, this kills me a little bit, Koch, but we're going to have a quick look at the 2020 Grand Final side, and there's 14 players that are going to have departed from that side if we look at this.
With some more question
marks. It's moved on quick. Yeah, time's moved on really quick. Did you see it playing out like this, looking back on it now?
Maybe not as quick as what it has happened, but the reality is that we were fortunate to have the success that we did, and we had a great quality of players and a lot of the guys that had contributed to what that culture is and was aren't actually on that sheet of paper there. So, when you do compare it to the Geelong side, which we're going to have a look at now, where I think there is only 8 in comparison to 14, it's a big difference. And I suppose a question to me, Sal, is what is it that allows teams like the Geelongs and the Sydney Swans to continually show up and be, is there something specific? Is it a number of things through your experience?
Well, no, it is a number of things. It's a great framework, obviously. It's set up by the coach and list management, no doubt, but there's a hunger that needs to be along with that, and really a balanced program more than anything else. And getting all that right is a real challenge. We've seen this year Chris Scott at different stages has had to move the magnets. We've seen De Koning through the ruck, Blitzarves, Tui, Duncan all play different positions, and the challenge is to keep getting the best out of your players, and that's what Chris has been able to do with his coaching staff.
Are you really surprised, though, when you talk specifics about the names? We're thinking that Rioli might move on now, Bolton might move on now, Baker might move on now, Graham might move on now. Now, surely those guys you would have been thinking when you retired, those guys are going to form the nucleus of being able to provide the leadership for this club for the next 5 or 10 years.
Yeah, and I think that's, if that becomes a reality, that's where it becomes quite sad for what you had hoped would be the legacy of when you're leaving a footy club. You know that there's some really brilliant people and a lot of talent there to actually carry, some of what you've created, but then also put their own spin on, what they think's important from a culture point of view, and to lose some of those key players and key people in that culture is going to be a challenge, but it's also an exciting opportunity.
Mitch Cleary will have more on that when he comes on a little later on. We've got a Blues side minus Harry Mackay and Charlie Curnow. And when you lose that quality out of the forward half, Joel Selwood, it becomes a fascinating watch as to how they manufacture scores, which they did a pretty good job of on the weekend.
Well, Jim, I just love what they doubled down on, and it was their stuff around the ball, but off the back of it, the way that they were able to exit the stoppages and then find these targets with the inside 50, the changes actually made them really hard to scout, which is the hardest thing when you're coming up any side that's been so predictable for a long time. When they're predictable and they're really good at what they do, they're hard to play against. But when they make the moves that they did, and we saw Kemp just on screen, went down the other end, did a great job on McGovern. Now, Michael Voss has a choice on what he gets to do and how he gets to go forward with this side too, with a couple of those moves from the weekend.
And you look at some of the key targets. Like, for me, it's not just the fact that they started to use different names going inside 50. It's also the willingness to make their defenders accountable, because they don't know where it's going, so therefore they become a little bit more fatigued. They can't rebound as well as what they possibly would have liked to from an offensive point of view. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword.
And you even think of those smaller guys that never thought they were a chance to get the ball. With the big guys there, that it was really just going to go to one spot and we had to get to their feet. Well, they become lively all of a sudden.
They looked energised though too, didn't they? Like, they looked like a different team on the road. We spoke about it last week, about the challenge that was before them. I think they only had 28 fit players to choose from last weekend as well, but they took up the challenge. Now, they've got to respond again, because we'll talk about it a little bit later, but they're coming up against St Kilda, who are in terrific form, particularly in the second half against Geelong last week, in a game that they need to win to make the finals now.
We had Sam Mitchell on this show not long ago. His Hawks, when they sizzle, they're like the front door of Bunnings. This is 7 goals in 11 minutes.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And look, again, Dylan Moore spoke post-game about the fact that they'd had Ariane Titmus there and talking about heats and how you had to play and that type of thing, and they used that as a theme going into the game. But I keep thinking this might be the most coachable young group of players in the competition right now. They have a plan in place. They go out and they execute it, and they play this thrilling, exciting brand of football that is just captivating.
It just looks like Sam Mitchell continues to keep putting fuel on the fire at the moment, and they're just exploding. They're growing week to week. They've probably had one off week in the last 2 months. So the growth that they're getting at the moment, and you can see the love that they're having playing footy, it's hard to stop.
How do you disrupt this? Like, if you're coming up against them as an opponent, how do you disrupt this?
It's a great question, because the momentum that they do have, like, I think everyone's been sitting there going, all right, like, when's the ride going to actually end? But they continue to prove time and time again. And I think the thing that I've loved is that they've got this willingness to, when they are challenged, we're just going to double down on what we know works for us. And that's really hard to stop, because there's a boldness about it. If the heat rises and teams bring pressure and they're pressing up and making them force turnovers, or at least try and make those errors, they just double down on what they know works for them. And, it only takes a small sniff to actually bounce back and, kick one goal, and then the momentum swings again.
Spiteful showdown, they mostly are. Yep. It's our best rivalry in our game. Cannot stand each other, these two. And they make no bones about it, which I absolutely love, by the way. But Josh Rochelle, I'm not sure I've seen a player on field take it to this extreme. He's headed over to the boundary to show he's got teeth, and most of the Port Adelaide fans, according to him, don't. But, Koch, tell us a bit about your reaction to this and what you're seeing elsewhere.
Oh, look, I love the fact that players engage with the crowd and bring them into the game, but there is times in games where I think celebrating with your teammates can actually be more important, and from an energy and momentum point of view, that's going to carry a true for your teammates. And I think it's the kind of celebrations. For me, I was always brought up with this attitude of respecting your opposition, whether that's players, whether it's fans. There's got to be a humility to it. And, even just being at under-10s games in the last couple of weeks, I've seen kids running to the boundary, shushing opposition crowds in under-10s. And I kind of sit there, and there's a part of me that goes, I just want to go over to the coach and tell him to, pull that kid off for the next minute. And you don't want to take away from the organic nature and people's personalities coming out in the game, but there is there is a line, and I think there's a few players that are crossing it.
They're just going to mimic, though, aren't they? The kids are going to mimic. And, I find it really difficult because on one hand, we're telling these players that they're part of the entertainment business and that's what they need to do. They need to connect with their fans. And you're right, there's this over-exuberance that happens out there on the football field in the moment. We see them display that, the connection between player-fan. I think the fans love that when the players acknowledge them. But I guess the time and the place thing is the issue here. And I always think it gets back to, what do your teammates think? Because this is not about self. This is not a game of tennis where it's only about you. This is a game of football where it can influence the other team and the members of your team. And if it does influence them in a negative way, then you actually have to modify your behaviours. And I think Laird came out and said almost words to that effect about the way that he would prefer Josh Rachele to play and the way that he would like him to behave out there on the field. And no coincidence, they've actually dropped him this week as well. So, it hasn't been a great year for this young man.
Well, it's just a great point. I just think back to the best sides and what they've done over the past 20 years. So the Richmond, Hawthorn, Geelong sides, I can't remember them, being that having such a selfish look at the play when they've kicked a goal or not. It's always been a shared value that, they continue to do and continue to drive in the same direction. It just looks a little bit broken at the moment.
It's the English Premier League model.
Well,
I'll
NBA.
score and I don't care what anyone else does. I'm off to the races. Brad Scott, interesting. We're going to have a good look at the Essendon Footy Club, Watto, but the decision not to pick Dyson Heppel because the season was still alive, he had this to say about that today.
Ultimately, my job is very difficult in that I've got to deal with sentiment, but ultimately my job is to get Essendon back to playing and winning finals. And that's what we're trying to do. And, we won't let anything stand in the way of that and that includes sentiment.
So for me, that's Brad Scott saying, if our season's still alive, it's incumbent on me as our senior coach to pick the team that I think is going to give us the best chance to win the game.
Yeah.
And if Dyson Heppel is not in that 22, then he doesn't play.
Yeah.
This week he's going to because their season's over.
Yeah, no, that's how I read it too. I know there was a lot of anger with Essendon fans because he didn't get a farewell game at Marvel Stadium last weekend. I understood where Brad was coming from, and I would believe that he also had a conversation with Dyson about that. Dyson's been a great club man. Yep. He would have understood that if he was to be picked, it would have been on his merit, not because he was getting a farewell game. I understand that, and there is some place left in the game for sentiment. But I think where Essendon is trying to re-establish itself, they talk about the edge. He talked about the players last week dying, playing as if their life depended upon it last week. They're not there yet, and he's still trying to drive them to that. Now, it may be the wrong way that he's going about it. It may be proven to be the wrong way down the track, but right now that's the way that he knows, and that's the way that he believes that he's going to be able to get this team to be what he wants them to be, and that is a successful team ultimately.
Yeah, I think we're seeing throughout the year Essendon at their best, but then when they drop below what is average, then they just come right back to the field, even below it. So they had the whole final series on the line on the weekend. You said Dive, your teammate out there, well, they couldn't do it. They're just not quite there yet. And the challenge is that they're going to be on holidays in 5 days' time and they'll sit back and watch another final series, which is unfortunate.
Did your flat screen TV survive Friday night?
Yeah, well, it's not flat; it's broken now. But I just want to show you and just talk about defensively. And I know there are teams out there now who believe that Essendon are particularly jittery down back, and I think we saw that again, particularly in the second half from the Sydney Swans. You've got three players here. Obviously, that should be an easy, clear Essendon ball. You've got one player there in Perkins who doesn't play a lot in defence, but he just walked away from the contest. I mean, he could have provided a shepherd. And then you've got Ben Mackay here being shepherded out of the ball far too easily and not being physical nearly enough. And we'll show another couple of grabs as well, another couple of highlights where he's just not physical enough on his direct opponent. And on that occasion, he lets Amadi actually come into the play. You see him from behind here. These are just fundamental things that can be changed. But at the same time, Joel, and I know you watched this game really closely too, there were times where they looked like they were just really fumbly Essendon and they looked like they were panicking with the ball. And then you've got their captain here who's playing on Heaney deep. I mean, really, he should have been taking the space in front of him and not allowing him any access to that ball whatsoever. But it just seems to me that there's a lack of cohesion, and particularly when the ball starts to come in quickly to Essendon's backline, they seem to lose their way really quickly and become this really panicky back six.
Yeah, I think other sides are just dictating what they want to do with them at the moment, whether they want to move the ball fast or slow and get it in there. But they look like they got the pieces to the puzzle, Essendon. They just don't know where to quite put them. I do. At different stages, I do. Throughout the season, I thought that they could actually be a finals contention side, win a final. But when they come up against, Sydney on the weekend, and you've got to do it in that moment. And we spoke throughout the years when they got the opportunity on a Thursday, Friday night, well, take your moment. If you want to stay there, well, this is your time. They haven't been able to do it.
No, they haven't. Very interesting grab from a star midfielder that we're going to have with Mitch Cleary later on. That was on the news
fascinating
tonight.
What he had to say.
It will be amazing. All right, Koch, I don't know if you did this in all the final series you played, but do you look at the other 7 teams in there and work out who it is you actually want to play against?
Well, it is interesting when you do look at it, and there is a couple of, we've called them the bunnies of the opposition. Right. So ideally, there's 9 teams that are going for the finals now, and you look at that list, the Brisbane Lions, 5 of 7 against the Giants. The Giants love playing against the Cats, winning 5 of 7. Fast forward down to past Geelong and Sydney Swans, Hawthorn, Brisbane Lions. But then Port Adelaide was the one that really intrigued me. There's 3 teams that they have a really good winning rate over them, in particular 2 of the informed teams of the competition. So, I mean,
I'm fascinated by this. So you really believe that there are teams out there, and you have recently experienced this, that you just went confidently into a game believing, OK, we've got their measure.
Yeah, well, for the first 10 years of my career, we couldn't beat the Cats.
No.
And I think they would have had the attitude that we were their bunnies.
Right.
And then we flipped it.
Right.
Well, there's one more bunny out there, must I say, because the Brisbane Lions have had trouble at the MCG. And again on the weekend, they fell in a little bit of trouble against Collingwood on the weekend. I mean, they had a great lead. And to be honest, I bring it back to not being ruthless enough. Relentless. I just think at times they go within their shell and they think about themselves a little bit more than the bigger picture. And this is their shot at it. If any time that they've got it, it looks like that they may play the first final at home. But at the end of the day, if you can't win on the G, then you're going to be in trouble.
This might be a little bit unfair to you, but you do work with them. Are you addressing that, or are they addressing the MCG as a ground and a problem for them?
Yeah, for me, it's probably more the moments in game that they're having conversations about, and
not the venue.
They can be, because realistically, the venue shouldn't impact those moments.
No.
Like with being 3 goals up, obviously Joe misses that, and we all miss goals, and in particular guys that have lots more shots than I did.
Are you aware though that I think 4 of the most inaccurate players in the game are playing at the Brisbane Lions right now? I mean, that's been a major issue for them this season.
Yeah.
That accuracy, yeah.
Yeah, and I suppose the conversation is always around, do you do more goal kicking, or is it something that's mental that's holding you back? So are you seeing the right people within the organisation that can help deliver the right result in those moments? But putting the goal kicking aside, there's little moments in games where you have things you can control and there's things that you can't control, and part of that is attention and being focused with genuine intent on that moment to make sure that you best execute.
One of the best stories for me this series, this summer, how am I going? This winter, I should say, is the resurrection of Jesse Hogan. He has been unbelievably good. We've always known how much talent this man has, but his season, he's going to win the Brownlow. You want me to start this whole segment? He is going to win the Coleman from here, and he has been...
He might win the Brownlow, by the way.
Well, he could win that too. But look at the body on the right there as well, Sal. Like he looks like a footballer and he's playing like a footballer. It is just superb.
He's playing better than that. He's playing like an absolute beast. The last 2 months, 33 goals in 8 weeks, 26 contested marks, and he's kicked a goal in each of his last 31 games. Like, this is a guy that's just got his footy all together at the moment. He's happy with how he's living his life, and the structure at GWS is really working for him.
You look at those numbers and it's not like they're mind-blowing different across the 2 lots of 70 games at each club. But for me, it's the confidence that he's playing and the way that that's then impacting the guys around him. He puts his hand up to anything at the moment and clunks it seems. And it's amazing what that confidence does for him, but also the team.
Do you reckon that's had a negative effect then on Toby Green? Because he hasn't had a great year. Do you think the significant rise of Jesse Hogan has meant that there's not the same amount of ball, not the same amount of direction of ball going to Toby?
Yeah, no doubt. But we still have to think Toby Green's had a 30-plus goal season again, and he's had nearly that in goal assist too. So if you're getting that from your medium-sized forward, you take it every day of the week. And the things that I'm loving around it is Cadman playing excellent footy, but then they have these little fellas that are just being so dangerous below him, Daniels and Jones, that are just causing havoc.
I think the thing with Toby Green as well, like you still have to put one of your best defenders on him, and it's all the stuff that you're not seeing. So, you know, is he doing more work with Jesse Hogan that's allowing him to play at a different level of confidence? Like, it's all the leadership stuff that maybe isn't seen by people with kicks, marks, handballs, goals that is really impacting that team.
We keep saying this is one of the most nuts seasons we've ever come across. The Cats, I know you want to have a look at them.
I do.
Week on, week off, they either look like they're winning the premiership or we don't know what's going on.
Well, since round 8, they are actually the 4th worst team at giving up the most 5-goal-plus streaks, which for me, if I'm the coach of the Geelong Cats, which I'm not, I'm concerned about, because the other 3 teams that are ahead of them are the 3 bottom teams in the competition. Yeah. And I remember distinctly having a conversation on this show, you know, way back in maybe round 4 or 5 of the season going, I feel like they're one of the teams that actually control momentum of game better than anyone else in the competition. And right now it's actually, the stats are saying it's actually the opposite, and they're really struggling with teams getting a run on. And then I don't know what the answer is.
No, well, it's a challenge. I think it's been a challenge since Stewart's probably gone up to the midfield, and not having that controller down there that probably sits in a spot that may be able to sit the guys in front of him in better spots too. So it's definitely a worry, because if you go into a final series and you leak 5 goals, then you're probably going to be in trouble. So they'll want to get on top of that in the next week.
Worry for Tom Stewart is, though, too, the fact that he's been tagged 6 times this year, and Geelong have lost each of those games. Now, there's not going to be a coach worth his salt that's not going to look at tagging Tom Stewart during the final series. So can Geelong find another way to overcome that? That's going to be a serious question that they'll need to answer.
Well, I know you're a keen farmer, Tim,
Yes.
but at the end of a long period of drought, you've got to break it at some stage. So Tom Stewart's going to break it, hopefully within that first final, and the Cats can have a win.
That's because you're going to be doing a rain dance.
Maybe.
Can you take injured players into a final? This is a point of discussion every time we get to the pointy end, and there are some players coming back.
Well, I just have a look at it this week and what risk you take. So there's obviously a lot of the guys ruled out already, obviously, but it's just, you know, the planning that goes into this and the next little period for these guys. We're talking 20 days is so important for what's coming up for them, because whether it's a first final or a second final, it all looks like that's the Sydney boys and maybe Tom Hawkins can look maybe to a second final, but for the other guys, you got to get ready as soon as possible, because your team needs you.
Did Tom almost rule himself out today? Like I saw a news grab from him today, and he's not particularly confident that he's going to come back and play in the final series.
He just said nothing's guaranteed. Yeah. So I think he's just being real with everything. That he's 105 kilos. He's a big guy. It's a foot injury. He's doing all he can, but he's still hopeful.
He's up against it.
He's hopeful.
Yeah.
We are heading off to a break. Mitch Cleary is going to join us when we get on the other side of it. We've talked about how this is a massive week of news. But before we get to that break, we're just going to pause and pay our respects to a much-loved member of the footy community. Sam Landsberger was a very popular person in footy circles. He passed, and our thoughts go with him to his colleagues, to his family and everyone that knew Sam Landsberger. Vale. Welcome back to Talking Footy. I said at the top, this has been a very big week as far as news is concerned. So let's go to the very best. Mitch Cleary, welcome to you.
Good evening.
All right, where do we start, mate? There's so much here. Blues injuries.
Well, the boys are fighting for a spot in September this week. They need to beat the Saints, and they could have just 26 players available for selection. So they had 28 last week in the win over the Eagles. They picked up a shoulder injury for Corey Durden, and Mitch McGovern is in serious doubt with a hamstring. Now they've got Sard, Curnow and Fantasia all with tests ahead of main training this week. But there is a chance they may not even be able to field a full team of plus emergencies of fit players. So watch this space on the Blues. I expect Adam Chera, no chance for the first final. More likely the boys will need to go deep if he's to be seen again this year, Adam Chera. And one to watch for the first week if the Blues get there is Sam Docherty. He's making a real case behind the scenes to play in the first final if the Blues get there. after doing his ACL in opening round.
Are they a chance to have to put paperwork in and add someone to their list?
Unlikely at this point, but you never know. There's going to be some names we've never heard of on the emergency list at least this week.
Been so much discussion about the Tigers. We've already spoken to Koch about it earlier tonight, about the changing guard there. And I threw up the names Bolton, Baker, Rioli, Graham, all potentially on the move. Who goes and who stays?
Well, there's a chance in this space of this off-season they lose 7 premiership players in one hit. So we know that Dusty's gone, Grimes is retired, and it's looking likely that Marlon Pickett will finish up at the Tigers and may get a farewell game this week against Gold Coast. Then you look at Liam Baker. Everyone expects him gone from the to the Eagles or the Dockers. Dan Rioli most likely to go to the Suns. Jack Graham laying up an offer from the Eagles. Then there's Shea Bolton. So he hasn't officially asked for a trade. That's 7 names in the space of one off-season. He hasn't put in a formal request, but he doesn't want to get into this toing and froing of I'm demanding, I'm out. His ideal world is that he does get a trade home to the Dockers, given they've got the trade hand, but there's no formal request.
What is the likelihood, though, of Baker choosing Freo if they're into him, and Bolton and Baker ending up at Fremantle?
Every chance.
Could they accommodate them both financially?
They could financially, for sure. The one to watch is around Freo is, do they need to pick from this year? They've got 3 first-rounders this year. Do they need to move a couple of those into next year because they're into Chad Warner for next year? So they've got to decide how hard they go on Baker and Bolton this year.
Yeah.
But then also, do they need something up their sleeve next year for a Chad Warner?
Don't you find it interesting that like Baker would be leaving a club that is the wooden spoon and going to another club that looks like they're in for a lot of pain still in a rebuild? I can't imagine that he's going to choose the West Coast Eagles, no matter how much money they throw at him.
Did support them as a kid, and there is a connection with Jared Schofield if he remains, if he gets the senior job as the interim. But there is a school of thought that the Eagles are in front for Liam Baker.
Fascinating grab on 7 News from Dylan Shield.
So he had an interest last year from the Saints. He had post-season foot and knee surgery. The knee surgery actually came about after playing with his daughter. It was an innocuous incident at home. He was playing blocks with his daughter and ripped his meniscus. He's confirmed today that he does have interest from the Saints. Again, this is him speaking on 7 News tonight.
They were certainly interested last year, and my understanding is, I'm not oblivious to the news that they're obviously interested again as well. So yeah, we'll see. I'm not going to deny when it's clearly happening. But I think we've become, as an industry, this is a bit more the way of the business, and we see that in other codes around the world. And football, it's certainly happening. We're seeing players, and with a week to go on the regular season, announcing their requesting trades from their football clubs, and we move on and act like adults. I'm certainly not doing that right now, by the way. So I certainly intending to finish my career at Essendon.
So he's got 1 year left on that 7-year deal he signed with the Bombers. How refreshing is that from a player? Because you don't hear all that often when you're talking about interest from another club.
They don't normally buy into that conversation like he bought into that conversation. Said, OK, we're all adults here. We need to talk about these things. Let's put it all out there. Yes, they have been talking to me. I've been talking to them. He almost went last year. I don't know. What was the sticking point last year?
Well, the Saints had concern around the injury late,
okay.
And I think it was pretty close last year, but they've come again. The sticking point this year is going to be the Saints. They've got decisions to make around guys like Seb Ross, Zach Jones, and then they're looking at a player like Dylan Shield, who is older than those guys. So there is some things to work out at the Saints.
I think he's an important part still to the Essendon midfield, actually.
Yeah, I do. He's shown it the last couple of weeks how important he is to them. Now, Mitchie, player movement across the league. Any news?
Well, one to keep an eye on is Joe Richards at Collingwood. He's played 8 games to date for the Pies. He was picked up as a school teacher out of Wangaratta as a mature age. He's coming to the end of his initial draft contract, Joe Richards. He's got a 4-year offer on the table from Port Adelaide. When they are keen on a player, they go super hard. So watch this space on Joe Richards, but he does have interest out there in the market. Another player when it comes to Collingwood is Mark Keane. They've got interest in luring him back. He obviously went back to Ireland and then came back to Australia to choose the Crows. He's having a really solid year as an Adelaide Crow. He's got a year to run on his deal at West Lakes. There's every chance he does remain, but he's got interest from the Pies. He won't play this week for Adelaide, given he is going back to Ireland for a family matter as of this weekend.
And earlier in the week, we learnt that Graham Wright was moving on from Collingwood. Today, Craig McRae, the coach of Collingwood, addressed that and the impact that's had on the football club. This is what he had to say.
Yeah, we've had terrific experience taken over from Wrighty. Brendan Bolton, standing over in the side, has stepped up big time and taken on a lot of extra responsibilities. He's probably done 2 or 3 jobs, and same with Justin Lepage. So we've had guys really step up and done a great job, and Roddy will be missed in particular from my friendship, mostly.
So a big part of Graham Wright's decision is he wanted to come back in a beefed-up role as opposed to what he left as footy boss. He wanted something more senior. The Pies weren't able to guarantee that for him, so he said, thanks, but no thanks, I'm going to look around. He's been heavily linked to a role at the AFL with Joel and the team, working with Laura Kane. So that is something to keep an eye on. He's got future ambitions to be potentially a CEO down the track, but Graham Wright has told the Pies that he's not coming back. It has caused a little bit of upheaval in the footy department, other people getting thrown into different roles, as we heard Craig McRae say there. And Justin Lepich is someone who's going to take on more responsibility in trade period, along with Derek Heinen and even the CEO, Craig Kelly, who's got experience in this space.
And Mitchie, you've picked up a reason why the Hawks are chasing key defenders.
Well, one of their key defenders just can't take a trick right now, James Blank. He did his ACL back in February. He's still not running. He's been in and out of hospital on several occasions this year due to a series of infections. So I saw him in the rooms on the weekend on crutches still. They're hoping he's back running by December, but that's a fair layoff from doing your ACL in February. And then the hope is that he might play in the early months of next year. But clearly the Hawks are into Josh Battle as a free agent at the Saints and Tom Barras at the Eagles. Just adds another layer as to why the Hawks are so keen with one of their key pillars who they had high hopes for this year in 2024, James Blank, being unable to progress so far in his recovery.
Dan Houston appeal?
Appealing tomorrow night, so watch this space on this one. Does he play his last game for the Power? Does he potentially get back? 5 games at the moment, that's the way the tribunal spat it out. If you can get it down to 4, there is some wiggle room if the Power play every final that he could play again. What do you guys think is fair on this one?
I would look. I would have given him a 4-week penalty.
Yeah, I tend to agree.
Yeah, I sit with Tim too.
5 felt a little heavy for me. I thought they might give him the chance if they get all the way through to play in the grand final.
Yep.
Is he still is he still on the move though? Is he still going to move?
Ideal world, he comes back to Victoria.
Yeah.
Melbourne is no longer an option, but there is some clubs still doing their work on Dan Houston. They're going to have to give up 2 top 15 picks for him though if he is going to get out.
Who do you think's in the lead right now?
That is a good question. I think North Melbourne would have the capital for it. It's just a matter of whether Dan Houston would want to go there. So that's a good way of sitting on the fence.
All right, we've heard enough of you, Mitch Cleary. Well done. Beautifully done. We are going to a break. On the other side of it, Joel Selwood has picked his All-Australian team, and it is controversial. I am very interested in this. Joel Selwood missed the meeting during the week, so therefore he's got the All-Australian team.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
Because no one else wanted it.
Quickly found out that I drew the short straw, apparently, but I did get a look at the All-Australian side, and I've gone for a side that's got a running defence. You know, the Tools picked themselves. They've had the most consistent year out of those 2 Tools. The best interceptor in the league with the best drive, which is James Sicily. Smart, small defenders. And then I go to the midfields, and it could be the biggest midfield that we've ever seen. Cripps, Bontempelli and Heaney, just full of power through there. 2 genuine wingers, I would say. Thanks, guys. And the forward line, I've gone Jesse Hogan. No, Jesse Hogan's always going to stay in there this year. Jezza just snuck in front of Waterman. And then Speedy Daniels, I tell you what, he's put his name up there this whole year, so he deserves his spot. A couple of guys maybe playing slightly out of position, but...
Right, what about Harris Andrews at full back and no Jacob Wiedering? When you weighed those up, you've given Harris Andrews obviously the nod. What was it ahead of Wiedering?
Oh, to be honest, purely just consistency throughout the year. So I actually, Wiedering has had a great year, but there's just been a lot of times, and we've seen him with heavily strapped corkies that he's got throughout the quads and whatnot, but I feel at parts of the year that sides have kicked around him, and Harris just has always seemed to get in the road.
Couldn't find a couple of spots for your Cats. Tyson Stengel, I'm interested on your opinion there.
Did I leave him out?
And Maxi Holmes, he's had an amazing year. That drive through the midfield has been amazing.
Well, Maxi Holmes and Harry Sheasel, young blokes that are the next in line, I reckon. And I always felt that the selectors always looked that you had to put a 40-game period out there. Right. Harry's probably done that.
Well,
so
here's
he'll break down the door.
Firstly, Nick Dacos played a minute at half-back, so you're just finding a spot for a midfielder somewhere else.
I'm going to argue that, Jim. When they needed to balance things out at the Pies after round 3, they sent him back, shored things up.
Until round 5, then he went back in. But the other thing is, teams in the bottom 6 have one player, Jeremy McGovern, who deserves to be in there, by the way. I would mount the argument it's far harder to play good football in a team that's crap.
Well, it's a fair point. I just have never known that case, Jim. So
No, you have no empathy.
I
No
just
sympathy.
have never known that.
What I'm hearing
case,
is you
but-
just don't care or understand.
No, I understand, and there's a lot of great
Yeah.
players within those sides, but unfortunately, their sides are down there, and they need to find some help around them.
It's taken us all this time to watch the
I'm
humility.
never doing it again.
Well,
Quick
now,
talk.
Maxi Gawn, just quickly, Maxi Gawn ahead of Marshall. Was
Yeah.
that a close call in Sherry?
It was purely because Maxi's been under the pump of late
Yeah.
with injury and missing games, but he just put the best chunk of the year together,
Yep.
and that was early on, and we can't forget that.
All right, time for this. Fast answers we require in quick talk, and let's get underway. In school terms, give us a grading for St Kilda's season.
D.
D minus.
D.
Oh, I like it. Only because our floor manager's throwing his file around. Who has had the better year, Sam Darcy or Harley Reid?
Sam Darcy, and at the start of the year, I paid Harley Reid $2 million.
Really jumped off him of late. I'm with Sam Darcy as well. I've been really impressed with the footy that he's playing, and he's going to be a key factor to them playing great footy through finals.
There might be a recent bias here. I'm going with Harley Reid.
Should Essendon re-sign Jake Stringer? We might start with you, Watto.
Yes, on a very, very tight rein.
I tend to agree. He's got so much X factor and attributes. It's just about what it needs to look like.
Yep.
Give him a year. I'd say give him a year, John.
Give him a year.
Should the bye be before the grand final instead of next weekend before the finals begin?
Yeah, well, it should be, but I tell you what, people within AFL House are pretty happy that it's before the week next week, because there's going to be a lot of flights and accommodation that are going to need to be booked, and they're going to be under the pump.
I think it should be before the grand final, and it gives the opportunity to bring back State of Origin.
I like it before the grand final too, and it gives the opportunity to anyone that might get a head knock in the prelim final maybe to get that out of the way so they can play in the grand final.
Put yourselves in Max Gawn's shoes. What would you say to Christian Petrarca?
To be honest, I'd get a group of the boys together and I'd say, what are we doing and how are we going to make this place better?
Yeah, I'd like to understand the why behind what the conversations have been happening, but also are you in or you're out kind of thing.
I wouldn't say anything, just a big cuddle and a big kiss. That's all he needs.
Who misses out? Who won't make the 8? Freo, Dogs, Blues, Hawks.
I think the Saints are going to get over Carlton, and I think they will be the ones that miss out Carlton.
Freo.
Freo.
Wow. Off to a break. Mark of the week, and say that again when we come back. Say that again moments away. Before we get there, mark of the week time. Sel, we start with you.
Well, Noah Bolter has been a shining light for the Tigers this year, I reckon. Whether it's up forward or up back, this one's up in the air. Lloyd Meek, take that one.
Yes, and now we head over west with Brodie Kemp taking a really good mark. And what I loved about it was the pirouette dismount, just to add a few bonus points.
He showed a bit as a forward, didn't he? Jimmy, I reckon you might win something.
Come
The
on.
Kangaroos may win something. It might be
Hey.
mark of the week. That's a nice grab there from jumping Jai Simpkin.
What about Libba? Looking around going, not again. $5,000 on the line from Virgin, so make sure you get stuck in afl.com.au/mark of the week. And we can't hold him back any longer. He's
No,
ready
let
to
him
roll.
loose. Let him loose. Let him loose. And we're going to start with Liam Pickering, and here's Pickers getting himself in a bit of a pickle.
I think it was 7 goals to 2 last quarter.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, they've got some tools. Jesse Hogan is a tool. Hang on,
Come on, Picks.
And Dermot's always been very descriptive. And why would you use 4 words when you can use 6 or 7?
If somebody said to me, give me 3 or 4 words of why Melbourne won today, they've been too tough for them.
That's 6 or 7. Nathan Brown, proving that the English language is fluid.
Just didn't play the same way Collingwood did late, and although Brisbane botched a very easable top 4.
Easable. Just let that slip into your
That's good.
language. And we've got Sam Mitchell, not sure. He can't tell the difference between the concussion protocol and an insurance company. Have a listen to this.
I don't know about it. Sorry, I don't. Was that early in the game? Oh, he had the what's it called? HIH test.
No, it's the HIA test. And we've got Bevo. Here he is talking about Rory Lobb today. Have a listen.
Lobby, he's almost got that attitude that if you cut a leg off, he'll grow it back. And I was trying to work out what sort of reptiles I'll get myself into trouble here, whether it's a salamander or a chameleon or it's just your garden variety lizard that can do that.
Now, come on, Bevo. Come on, Bevo. There's only one lizard in the game, isn't there?
Yes.
And he plays for who?
Sydney Swans.
The Sydney Swans. There's only room for one lizard in the game. Now, Tony Shaw, old school Tony Shaw, getting a lesson by or from the Geelong captain, Patrick Dangerfield.
Does anybody have a defensive setup, like a defensive triangle with a floater, sitting back anymore, or is it just you go with what you think's going and hopefully it goes your way? It's a bit of a Russian roulette situation, wasn't it?
It's not 91 anymore, Tony.
Take that. That's a nice old slap across the chop.
Come on, Danger.
And if you wanted any reason why Joe Biden is no longer standing to be the US president, have a listen to this.
Women are not without electoral.
What do you reckon, Jim?
My goodness.
Did they make the right move, the
I think that might have been the right road forward. We are going to break some big statements from these three next as we wrap up big edition of Talking Footy. Welcome back, everyone. Just a reminder, Friday night football at the MCG, Melbourne and Collingwood. Actually shapes as an interesting game, even if we're not talking about the finals relevance. Melbourne coming off a win and Collingwood, of course, doing what they do best, winning in the death.
Well, they have, yeah, and it's going to be a tight one. Still, for both sides, it'll be quite sombre come the end of the game, I'm sure.
Yeah, no, there's been a lot of discussion about the Demons over the last couple of weeks. They were great on the road last week against the Suns, and Collingwood have probably put a couple of players away for the year, but they always give a good account of themselves.
Final word time. We start with you, Joel Selwood.
Well, I had an ex-teammate that rang me up today and just asked if I was on the show tonight. And I said, yeah, I'm on the show. I said, what do you need? And he said, well, can you just remind everyone what I did back at this time? Because I'm not sure if they'll remember me come next year. So, Zach Toohey, congratulations on a great career. He was a great teammate and a great pick-up for the Cats when we brought him across in the Blues.
He has been a star. The most games from an Irish player.
Congratulations, Zach. But mine is also a bit of a heartfelt one. The Richmond Footy Club wanted to celebrate Neil Baum's contribution to footy, not just at the Richmond Footy Club. Unfortunately, had some health challenges go on and missed that opportunity. So just some acknowledgement and appreciation for everything that he's done to AFL footy.
Great man.
Mine's a heartfelt one of a different kind too. Obviously, for those sides that don't make the finals, it'll be Mad Monday on Monday. Now, if you are a captain or a leader or you aspire to be one, please don't turn up on Monday dressed like this.
Did you know this was going to come back and bite you as hard as it has?
And get a fake tan if you're going to be that pale as well. Like, seriously, how
did you dive into your own wardrobe there? Where have you got that stuff from?
Well, clearly a costume shop, Jim.
Then why didn't you get something decent?
You were a mankini on live television.
That never happened. We need to go enjoy a big weekend of footy and we can't wait to bring the finals to you.